Josh, why don't you share a little bit about your background and give us a picture of what you're doing these days? Josh and I worked together years ago at Indiana Wesleyan. It seems like just yesterday that they kept getting us confused, both of us starting on the same day, both being named Josh, both being stationed in Cleveland, that they got us confused all the time until they saw us. And then they saw that I wasn't nearly as tall as Josh, nearly, nor did I have the flowing mane on top of my head like Josh has. So share a little bit about what's going on with you, Josh.
Sure. Thank you, Josh. And as you said, we both started off at IWU in Cleveland, Ohio. And for years, and you're still, when I run into some people from IWU, they're like, which Josh are you? So it's, I eventually moved to the main campus later, and it was very interesting because people still confused us, even seeing me all the time.
Well, which one do you like? Josh Fisher or Josh Black? Then you choose the right one, right?
Whichever you prefer,
Right.
whichever is convenient.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I have had the joy to serve in the adult and online arena here for the past 18 plus years, and 10 years at Indiana Wesleyan, and over 8 years now at Lee University, and have served in various roles out in the regional sites, at IWU, and then at the main campus working in one of the non-traditional schools, and then moved here to Lee University to serve as executive director over our non-traditional programs, which here at Lee, we used to have both on-site and online, and unfortunately, as the market shifted, everything has moved online for our non-traditional side. So, but really enjoyed being back at my alma mater and expanding some things here at the university. When I came to Lee, all of the programs were ministry programs, and so it's been neat to broaden that out to a wider population. And I have a wonderful wife who's an accountant. She teaches on campus here. I have 3 sons, and we are kind of going through a different period. Both McKelly and I have taught in higher ed for a long time, but we've never had sons who were at the institution we were teaching at. 2 of my kids are on campus, and the other's a senior in high school doing dual enrollment. So very interesting being a parent and an employee at the same time, as I know some of you are experiencing or have experienced. But I've taught and designed curriculum for several institutions, and have had the experience to be able to see some different models out there. You might say the good, bad, and the ugly. And I've had the joy of working with colleagues all across the country and been involved in several different organizations. So I'm very excited to share some topics with you this afternoon, and to hopefully learn some more things. This has been an amazing day. Hopefully you've seen all the sessions today. If you've not, I would definitely encourage you to go back and watch some of the recorded ones. As a matter of fact, I wanted to change my whole presentation after watching a few of them because they've already covered some things. But would like to share with you a little bit about just a brief history of the adult and online market, and let's talk about where we are today and where we're going. So starting off, in the early 20th century, as most of you know, American higher education really did not have a lot of non-traditional programs operating. Obviously, we did not have online programs, but historically, there's been a number of Christian ministry programs that have been non-traditional across some of the Christian schools, but there wasn't a lot of options for anyone that wanted something outside of ministerial training. The great research that was done by John Sperling in the 1970s, that some of his colleagues there in California were making fun of him for John Sperling, the founder of the Apollo Group, the University of Phoenix, the Institute for Professional Development, and on and on and on, the other components of the Apollo Group, did some amazing work in really seeing that, you know, adult learners not only learn differently, but they should be treated differently by institutions of higher learning. And not all of our colleagues were interested in hearing that, of course. If you are not familiar with the Institute of Professional Development that Apollo Group had, that was the arm of Apollo that worked with primarily non-traditional schools, or I'm sorry, non-traditional programs at private schools across the country. And one that Josh and I both worked at was Indiana Wesleyan. They were one of the early partners with the Apollo Group on that. Now, also in the adult and online world, University of Wisconsin had done some great pioneer work with distance education. They still host an annual conference, the Distance Teaching and Learning Conference. I believe it's every August in non-COVID years up in Madison, Wisconsin. If you have not attended, that is a great conference. There's a lot of different ideas and perspectives and things that are shared at that conference. Also, Nova Southeastern in Florida, they were one of the pioneers in creating doctoral programs at a distance, and those came out before online. And of course, the University of Maryland has done work for decades now with especially the military population and what used to be called the University College, but I believe they've recently changed it to University of Maryland Global Campus. Now let's fast forward as non-traditional was expanding throughout the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. Let's go forward to 2011. And I choose that year for a reason here. Adult and evening weekend programs across the country were expanding, primarily though, as most of you know, in private schools. Almost every state and most parts of different states had programs that were opening up that were geared for working adults, either in the evenings or the weekends. And I do remember when Josh Fisher and I had the privilege to work together up in Cleveland, Ohio, we were one of the first programs in that area that, that was geared specifically for working adults and saw great success there. Then we had the growth of online programs. They were still growing in 2011, still definitely new in some markets. The growth of for-profits. And most of us remember the commercials of all the for-profits that were around. And that competency-based model that Western governors debuted not only in the West, but it also moved to Indiana and Tennessee and Texas and several states that adopted Western governors as a institution in their state, in some cases an actual state institution, which was very controversial. Also in 2011 there, we saw the start in the push for micro degrees and many credentials that were starting to form, stair-stepping programs for those that wanted chunks of education and not a whole degree. They didn't want to borrow money for an entire degree or spend the time on an entire degree. They were just wanting some chunks of education to get them to the next promotion or the next job and moving forward. Also, at that time period, some of the state schools were starting to awaken to this idea, oh, there are non-traditional students out there that we can capture and take from some of these private programs and some of these for-profits that are out there. Also in 2011, the U.S. Department of Education released the negotiated regulations, or the neg regs, that became a game changer in higher education in a number of areas of higher ed, affecting not only financial aid, but affecting programs that were offered at a distance, both online and on site. State compliance rules started to be a common discussion point. And if you were a lawyer in higher ed in 2011, it was a great year to be working in higher ed legal matters. For-profits started to be crushed, though, by these increased regulations that were moving on in 2011. Regional accrediting bodies started to be reined in. Some of the regional accrediting bodies that had allowed different programs and different schools to operate in different ways were starting to be questioned by the federal government, and as it hit the media, by everybody else. State schools started really launching online programs to compete with not only within their state, but to compete nationally. And online program management opportunities for a few organizations really started to blossom as more and more schools were looking at online as a real option for expansion for their institution. So then we move forward, we see NC Sarah in 2012, and moving forward, NC Sarah was developed to become the answer for state compliance issues for all of us that were at schools that could not afford to spend millions of dollars on legal fees and hire an entire department of people to keep up with the state compliance issues that were popping up everywhere, depending on the type of programming you offered. NC Sarah was a answer from heaven. State schools also, one thing to notice in the 2012-2013 academic year, in the online rankings that were still fairly new from US News and some other organizations, they started to shift from for-profits, who primarily dominated the online rankings for online programs, to state schools. And if you look at the rankings today, it's amazing to compare over the last 10 years. Evening and weekend programs started to dry up in certain markets as people found or discovered online programs and how they didn't have to go to the education center or fight traffic to go to a campus location somewhere. They could stay at home or stay at work and be on their computer and complete their degree completely online. For-profits also started becoming nonprofits and moving forward in the legal process of trying to change out of the for-profit status and become more popular with the general public. Also, in this time period, 2012 to 2020, there was a huge media push on revealing all the dark secrets of the for-profits and all the students who had been wronged by them. And so there was a lot of negative press against the for-profit market on top of the government regulations. Now, as we move forward to this year, to March 2020, some of your institutions may have been on spring break or about to go on spring break or just back from spring break. This worldwide pandemic hit. And I was actually at a meeting yesterday and heard somebody say that they didn't really believe everything about the coronavirus until they heard that March Madness was canceled. Then they took it very seriously and realized that the world was about to change. Well, not only the world changed, but also American higher education. As you know, and has been discussed several times today, higher education had to go remote. Faculty who literally swore they would never have anything to do with smartphones, with the internet, with computers, were suddenly teaching remotely via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and a number of other platforms. Having kids who are attending our campus here, I knew there were some, and I can pick on them, history professors that I wasn't sure what they would do, if they would just pack it up in March or what, but some of them actually created Moodle pages and started broadcasting on Zoom. I was shocked, so needless to say. But as we look at this situation now, that the pandemic has happened, people were stuck in their homes and stuck in lockdown mode for months. We have to think, how is that going to change higher education and the view of higher education? And I know, as was discussed in the panel earlier, some people think it's really going to make online explode. Other people think it will push people back to in-class, face-to-face instruction because they were tired of what they perceive as online. So the whole discussion of remote or online is something to definitely be discussed. But remote or online being mandated in the US and multiple states, still, there's not only a blurred understanding of online versus remote, there's kind of a blurred understanding of what's going to happen in the future. There are many universities, there's many P-12 districts right now in education across the country. They don't know what's going to happen in January for classes, let alone a year or 2 years or 3 years from now. There are plenty of parts of the United States right now that kids are not in the P-12 classrooms, and there's plenty of parts of the country that they probably won't be in higher ed classrooms for the rest of the academic year either. So there's definitely some more discussion in higher education that we need to be having about really understanding what is online going to look like for the future for the non-traditional student, and what does online look like for traditional students. I believe it was mentioned earlier also that, you know, people understand in March when the remote lockdown happened and classes went remote, that that was an emergency situation. But expectations now as we move forward are going to be much, much higher than they were this past April. So what parents and students and non-traditional students are expecting out of their educational experience is really going to be, the bar is going to be much higher. So where do we go next now? You know, will more campuses launch online courses and programs for traditional residential students, being that so many people were forced into the online situation? Or will we see more people want just face-to-face? And I know that's an internal discussion at our institution here at Lee University, as we've had Zoom options and hybrid courses for the fall on the campus. And some faculty and some students are saying, I would rather us have more smaller sections and be socially distanced and spaced out than to have more remote instruction. So that's a discussion for campuses moving forward. But some questions to think about, you know, will the future of non-traditional education be hybrid? Will it be synchronous or asynchronous? Now, obviously for our non-traditional students, hybrid can be very difficult depending on the student's work schedule, where they live, how far they are from your campus locations or your teaching sites. And the same can be said for synchronous. I have plenty of students here at Lee. We have over 800 online students. We have some of them that are single parents. Some of those single parents work 2 jobs, very involved in their community. They're involved with their children. They're involved with their grandchildren. They're involved with the church ministry they're involved in. So when they're logging onto their class, and that's at 10 or 11 p.m. in their time zone, they may not be able to log on at the same time with their professor and with the rest of the class. So, you know, as there have been in the past, that's one of the discussions that needs to be had. If you expect synchronous instruction or synchronous experiences in your courses, do you set up multiple options for your students? How do you schedule those? And how do you take that approach if you're looking for instruction that's not just straight asynchronous? So, and then will, you know, online be primarily for non-traditional students in the future? That's definitely something to think about. Some of the institutions across the country right now have moved to kind of this campus or online model, not just online for non-traditional students, but online for anyone that wants to go online. So how does that change discussions, let's say in a business course where the business faculty wrote that course to be designed for businessmen and women who have, you know, at least 15 years of experience in the business setting compared to a student coming straight out of high school that may have only worked a part-time job. So how does that discussion, really happen? And it makes an interesting situation for the instructors. They try to facilitate that. Another thing to think about is we think, where are we going next now? All education, we're talking preschool through higher education, moved remote and has been, as some people say, online this year. Expectations are changing. So there are definitely some people that are questioning now, maybe homeschooling's not a bad option. So if those kids are in high school right now, what is their expectation as they move to a campus in a few years, or will they just want to go online and not go to a campus experience? The same thing is to be said for our adult programs now that more and more of our potential students out there, of our non-traditional students, have been working from home and realizing, oh, I can work from home. They're talking about, why don't I take online classes and finish my degree that I've been working on for the last 22 years? Well, they are probably seeing this as a possibility for them. So there's good and bad with the pandemic effects that have happened this year. So what are the ramifications of the future of higher education? Where will we go? What is 2020 really going to do to the potential student pool for your programs that are out there? And are people encouraged now that they can go back to school and they can do this remotely? Or are they scared to death because they've had a bad experience with working remotely, or they weren't able to work remotely? So, there's a lot of different questions, a lot of things to think about. But I would definitely like to open up for questions right now. Which direction is your institution going? What are some of the internal discussions that you guys are having as far as, what is next for us? One thing I can tell you, I can clearly remember some discussions with some colleagues 10 years ago about what type of programs were going to be online in a few years. And I had some friends that were telling me, only business and nursing and education are going to be online, maybe criminal justice and a few other things. But, we will never see psychology online, or we'll never see sociology fully online. And now most programs and most institutions are starting to move online and give options to students that were not there in the past. So if you would like to, either in the Q&A or in the chat, to put your thoughts, which direction do you see your institution going? And that's a question I know we have at our institution. Where are we going next online?
Cynthia says, love your overview of the history online, Josh. Yes, there are changes coming. At Ohio Christian, we think more traditional students will want the flexibility of the online classes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I have been shocked at a couple very anti-online faculty that I know, two that I go to church with, have come up to me recently, and the whole Zoom experience opened up to them, or secured in their mind, that it is possible to learn online. I guess everything that's happened is what they needed as the impetus to change their minds.
Shannon Mulford says, agreed. We're seeing more traditional students who are asking for online class flexibility and one class at a time mode. One of the things that I've said for a couple of years now, in fact, I wrote an article about it, is when we switched, when Facebook really became popularized, it seemed like there was a shift for the acceptance of online education, because suddenly people realized that there was the opportunity to have this relationship. Grandmothers were connecting with their grandchildren and vice versa. Long lost friends were connecting on Facebook. friends were staying connected on Facebook, and there was that aspect of a tangible connection there being made. And suddenly, oh, we can probably do education this way now too. Now we've got COVID that has come into the situation, and we're going, oh, there's a lot to be said for online education, or that could be done in through online education, because we had to do it. We figured out it had to work. So
that's a great point.
any other comments or questions? Oh, Tim Eads says, tremendous overview of the adult and online history, Josh.
Thank you.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for your time today and for your presentation. Much appreciated.
Not a problem. Thank you so much. This has been outstanding today, and I am excited excited to re-energize my team here. So this has been wonderful. Great. Especially in a year where we couldn't attend anything. So this
right, exactly. I'm sorry I can't offer you a trip to an exotic location.
No problem. Thank you so much.